Do you ever feel like your goals slip through the cracks or that you lose in focus over time? That used to be me until I found a way to bring more structure and clarity to my planning. In this video, I'll show you how I maximize productivity with two key techniques: quarterly planning and weekly reviews. These simple steps have helped me to stay on track, hit my goals, and keep everything organized. And whether you're working on your professional or personal goals, I believe this system can help you as well. And before we jump into the details, I want to let you know that these two techniques, quarterly planning and weekly reviews, are part of my bigger productivity framework. I have another video on my channel where I give an overview of that system as a whole, so you might want to watch that first if you haven't already. And now let me show you how I do these techniques, starting with quarterly planning. So to give you some context, here what we're looking at is the app called Things, which is my personal task manager of choice. And this is a recurring project called quarterly planning that repeats every 3 months, and these are the steps involved in this project. And first of all, let's address the elephant in the room and let me explain why it's quarterly planning, which means I do this every 3 months, and let's say why not every 6 months or not every year. And I think people in general, of course myself included, are pretty bad at estimating how long something will take, especially if it includes any novelty or some kind of creative projects. So the longer the time frame, the more likely all those plans will turn into just a pure guessing and speculation. For example, if you take 1-year plans, it feels so far ahead that, it feels like you always have the time to start, so you kind of delay in starting something out. But then towards the end of that 1-year plan, it feels like everything is so condensed, so you start working like crazy, so at least for me that never worked well. On the other hand, doing this every 3 months feels like a sweet spot for me, where it gives enough room to actually execute in the thing, but at the same time maintaining a healthy level of pressure, just a little bit, a sense of urgency. And I also like the fact that it aligns with the seasons of nature. So yeah, that's why doing this quarterly feels like the sweet spot for me in terms of the frequency of this event. And during that event, I like to go somewhere where I can sit quietly with my laptop for a few hours without distractions, and ideally some kind of new places just to shift the perspective a little bit. That could be some kind of coffee shop, so maybe a library or some other public places. And so here's what I actually do during that process. First, I self-reflect. And to sort of get myself into the groove, I have a couple of prompts, questions I ask myself, which are what worked well and what didn't so much, why, what's on my mind now, and how do I feel. Now, the crucial part about this self-reflection step is to make sure to write things down. Personally, I'm using another app where I keep all my notes. Of course, you can use pen and paper, whatever that might be for you. And I found there is something interesting happening when you transfer your thoughts through the writing or typing process into a written piece. And somehow you start to see things much clearly. And I think writing in general is a very powerful tool for raising your self-awareness and getting more in tune with yourself. So even if you ignore the rest of the system and do just this self-reflection step alone and actually dedicate some time to think about it, this is really beneficial. The next step I do is revisit my goals and values. And just to make sure that do these values still resonate with me? Are my goals aligned with my values? Answering these two questions for me doesn't take too much time because I know what my values are, but if you do this exercise for the first time, you might spend some extra time identifying your values in the first place. Next, I'm setting up goals for the next quarter. Now, I usually have a list of goals that I would like to achieve someday, and I think in the world of web development there is a concept of backlog, which is a stack of things that you would love to do someday, or maybe you have to do someday. So for me, it's kind of similar thing, or maybe you can think about it as clouds. They kind of passing by, all the goals that I would love to make. Some actually get outdated over time, so they just passing by and just, wave them goodbye and that's it. But for some other goals that I would actually love to achieve, I sort of picking them up and setting for the next quarter. And for every goal I choose, I want to make sure that I articulate on why this goal, and I found it really helpful for going through. And then I also make sure that I have an answer for the question, how will I evaluate the result? And let's say for some goals that are a little bit more ongoing and abstract, and let's say maybe like learning a foreign language, let's say it's a Japanese language, how and when will you know that the goal is completed? I think that's a little bit of a tricky thing. So this is why it's good to know when to stop and when the goal is actually completed. And maybe in the case of learning a language, maybe for me I would consider this goal completed as soon as I'll be able to watch anime without subtitles or something like that. Next, I break down my goals into actionable steps, and here I also ask a couple of questions. Are there any blockers that stop me from achieving my goal? And what is the single next step I can take towards my goal? And I found that both of these questions are really important ones. So let's say if you would like to travel, but maybe you are too tight to your work schedule, or maybe your financial situation doesn't allow you to do so. So this would be the blockers, and in that case, you might want to rethink how would you get enough resources, both time and money, to achieve your goal. And so having more flexibility in your time or increasing your income might be your next step that you should do instead, because achieving them will then allow you to achieve that goal of traveling. And what is the next single step I can take towards my goal is very also helpful to think about, especially when you're trying to tackle something big. But this will help you to think what is just the only one step I can take maybe today that will help me ultimately to get there someday. And finally, during the quarterly planning, I am identifying key projects for the upcoming weeks and asking myself, what am I most eager to start first, and are there any tasks or projects time sensitive? And the first one is kind of fun, I suppose. I mean, since I'm building my dream life, then why not to start with something I'm generally more excited about? And the second question helps me to think, is there anything that I should be scheduling for a specific time or specific week or even specific day? Oh, and by the way, the first 3 steps that I'm making, it's all about writing and thinking, and I'm usually do all of that in an app called Notion. And these 2 steps, when it comes to more specific and actionable steps, I'm transferring all of those thoughts and goals from Notion to this very app called Things, which is again my task manager of choice. So one quarterly planning session takes me about 2 to 3 hours, and I would say it has the biggest return on investment because it's during that 2 to 3 hour session I shape my next 3 months. Now let's switch to a more tactical level and talk about weekly reviews. So we're again in Things, my task manager. This is a recurrent project called Weekly Review. As you can see, it repeats every Sunday, which somehow works the best for me. And this is the list of things that I do during that process, which by the way takes me just about 15 to 20 minutes. So most of these things are pretty self-explanatory, but let me just quickly go over each one. So check my Things inbox, it's the inbox of my task manager, and sometimes I do quick entry to kind of quickly dump some thoughts or some things I need to do. Then I make sure that I didn't forget anything. Then I'm browsing some flagged emails in my mailing app just to make sure that I reply to everyone I wanted to reply, or maybe that I need to follow up to some emails. Then I'm checking my spam email inbox just to make sure I'm not missing anything, because every once in a while I find there is an email that shouldn't be there, so it's good that I'm checking that as well. Then I'm checking my calendar events for the upcoming week, just to make sure that I have a reasonable expectations of my availability next week, what things I should schedule, what I can schedule, and what is probably already preoccupied with all those meetings and other events. Next, I'm checking deadlines here in Things, again just to make sure I'm not missing anything. And I usually set deadlines only for the tasks when there are some real consequences of not doing something in time. For example, like paying taxes and things of that sort, when you have a real penalty of not doing this in time. Then I'm having a quick look at my goals to see whether I'm on track, because I found that sometimes it's easy to get off the track and sidetracked by other things that are naturally happening in your life. So I found this step to be a nice reminder to myself of what I actually want to do. And then I'm scheduling tasks for the next week, setting deadlines for time-sensitive tasks, again like paying taxes or something like that. Next, I'm moving to the someday bucket all the tasks that I won't be doing in the coming weeks, just to declutter my task manager and making sure that everything is up to date. And I'm also removing all the tasks that are no longer relevant or outdated, which sometimes happens as well. So I would say 5 of those steps are sort of catching up and checking in and making sure I'm not missing out anything. And depending on those things, depending on how many things coming into my world, I might have or might not have a certain amount of time for the next week. So this is why I'm checking this first before scheduling and setting up everything for the next week. So even though this weekly review process takes me just about 20 minutes, it's really that quick, I still find it extremely helpful, because when I do this on Sunday, and then when I wake up next Monday morning, I know exactly what's on my plate, and I'm not wasting any energy or thinking what I should be doing, and I can just execute. I guess it's like going to the gym, but for your mind and not just for your body. So these 2 techniques, quarterly planning and a weekly review, can help tremendously to stay focused and move towards your goals. But what if you don't know what you want in life? In that case, I recommend watching the previous video on my channel where I share the Ikigai method. In that video, I go over the key concept to finding the intersection between the 4 areas, which helps to find a life purpose. Well, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.